It was a bad week for Ukraine as it pertains to its image. Most importantly, Zelensky, because earlier in the week, the parliament and then Zelensky approved of the removal of the two anti-corruption boards. And here's the thing. In the beginning, we didn't understand what was going on. It seemed like the two boards that were put in place since 2014 after the Iron Maiden to stop corruption was removed so that corruption could happen. This sparked protest inside of Ukraine, had leaders in every country go, what on earth is happening here? And then it looked like Zelensky backtracked. But here's the thing. Now that it's been about a week, we see what Zelensky has kind of done. And it looks more or less like one of his readers said here, is that Zelensky kind of played 4D chess to actually get rid of corruption by removing a corruption board and then reinstalling it. And I know this sounds really, really strange, but Redditor Pitful Ear 3303 made a very, very interesting post. And I want to read it and then talk about it because it is quite interesting. And when you really dive down and deep into it, if it truly is that Zelensky found corruption and he's trying to get rid of it and this is how he did it, was extremely smart. So in this post here, it says, did Zelensky pull a 4D chess move on corruption and traitors inside of Ukraine? Ultimately, they put together 7 steps in which this entire week was categorized down into. Step 1, they declared a controversial bill to reduce the NABU's independence. That is the national authority when it comes to investigations. There's 2 of them, the SAPO or something like that, and this one. And they work in the sense of there's 2 individual boards that can investigate different groups. They're independent of the government, so that way they don't have any, let's say, influence. No one can say to them, oh, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. There is no influence whatsoever. This bill removed the independence and put essentially a special prosecutor in charge to look into these investigations. We found out later that there's a lot of people who are politicians who have been, let's just say, had a case against them and they were never investigated, even though they should have been investigated. And that's one of the reasons why Zelensky was like, wait a minute, clearly there's a reason why we have to figure this out. So that's one. Number 2, explain why it's done. Well, we found out that that board was heavily influenced by Russia. Russia somehow got in, which is why some of these members who have been peacefully living in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine have never been investigated, even though this board should have been investigating them, which means that someone had to have been giving them information. We're finding out that Russia did do that. Number 3. Protest erupted, which makes sense. That was something we can all predict here. We kind of figured that a lot of people would have been angry that we got rid of the one thing that would have kept them not corrupt. And so looking into it, yes, protests started. And I'm pretty sure Zelensky knew this because in a non-free world, we're talking about Belarus and other countries like Russia, you cannot protest. You cannot. And when you do, boy, does the government start throwing things at you, whether it be water cannons, whether it be sound, whether it be bombs, like not bombs, but fire smoke bombs and things like that. But in a free society, you could protest, which actually shows that, look, Zelensky said, I'm hearing here, we're listening to you, we're changing things, something that a corrupt government would never do under a dictatorship. They would never do that. But it proved to the world that Zelensky over here, hey, we are a democracy. They didn't like this. We're going to change it. Now, these protests, they were nonviolent. There was no suppression. Reporters were able to report on it. Once again, would never happen in a dictatorship. It would never happen in Russia or Belarus, in countries like that. Next, they used the widespread protest as justification to consult with Western partners to revise the bill. They then restored the NABU's independence, but with the condition of a stronger oversight in all intel agencies. So they got the board, they removed the board, they weeded out the corruption, they installed the board back on with more insight and more things put in place to make it stronger. So that way there are people inside the government who have been under suspicion that could fully be investigated. Next, number 5, those who supported the original bill are now under public scrutiny. So think about this for a second. This bill was introduced by Zelensky's team, and then everyone voted. Now, if you were on board with removing the thing that would potentially prosecute you, if you were fast to vote on that, you probably had something to hide. You had something which would maybe make you go, yeah, I don't want to be investigated because I've done some bad things. Yeah, let's get rid of that board. Those people are now going to be under investigation. And there were people that said no to this. There were. And we know that Zelensky's party had voted in favor of this to weed out those people. Once again, 40 chests there. So now those people are going to be on their toes. And there's no more immunity. Because they know that, yeah, we voted this way, and now even if there's a slight chance of it looking like a certain thing, they're going to straight up come after us. So now that not only stops corruption from the people that are currently in power in parliament, but it also sends a message to anyone down the line that we know who you are, and if you're going to try to do these things in the future, you're going to be prosecuted. And it's going to be done by an independent counselor that is the same one, but with a stronger oversight that's able to go after people. And I will tell you that over the next few months, we're going to see Ukraine really go after and prosecute people that abandoned Ukraine and are now living in other countries. And because they had Western help in rebuilding these things, they now built the connection. So let's say that you were a Ukrainian politician. Let's just say from 2014 to 2017, you took advantage of something and then you left Ukraine, you're living in Germany. And yes, you know I'm talking about certain people. Now, we can go to Germany and say, yeah, we need to get this guy out of here because he did X, Y, and Z. We want to prosecute him. And Germany goes, okay. Because it does show that we're trying to get rid of the corruption. We're trying to make things better. And so number 6, the corruption/traitor elements in all the intel agencies are now on their toes. Because, yeah, they know that there's going to be a problem. And then number 7, they said here, the result, a stronger, democratic, less corrupt Ukraine, basically a partial detox/reset of the government and intel agencies. It gains more trust from the people and Western allies. There's a lot in that. And there are pluses and there are minuses. First of all, Zelensky's been the most anti-corruption guy ever. And he's been making examples. I talked about this in my last video, where Zelensky has gone off and has done all of these things to make sure that corruption's out. And once it is out, they post it everywhere. I mean, I've seen countless videos and photos where they've taken like $100 bills and laid them across people's beds and had them standing in the background. They show like, this guy did this. This guy did this. So they're doing this and they're making it public. So that once again, if you as a politician, future or now, you realize that, oh no, I'm in for hurt if I'm doing these kind of things. And yes, that is great. That's a great image to have. But I will say it definitely hurt Ukraine a little bit. And I mean, it hurt them. Because for a while there, because there was no communication, in which Zelensky did later on acknowledge that there probably should have been a little bit more information, but since they were doing this all at once, ripping off the Band-Aid, there was only so much they could say, because then people could hide things and shred things and do all these other things. It would ruin, essentially, the full-blown reason why they did this, which was to catch people voting in the act in the wrong way and then fully investigate them to see whether or not they're doing corruption, because at the end of the day, every country does have corruption, but Ukraine has a history of people assuming that everything is corrupt. But under Zelensky, it hasn't. Not in the past 5 years. We've seen a major change. And now with this rip of the Band-Aid, and now what's going to be coming in the next few months, that mindset that's been installed since the 90s that Ukraine is corrupt is hopefully going to be removed. But because of this, it had politicians here in the United States, including Graham and Blumenthal, both who are very avid supporters of Ukraine, say things. And then what happened in Europe? Because unfortunately, the EU saw exactly what was happening and went, oh no, this is a problem, Ukraine. And yesterday, the EU held a meeting where they said to Ukraine, we're going to be pausing some aid towards you. 1.7 billion. In euros, I think that's 1.5 billion euros. They're holding that money. That's a part of, think of their 4.7 billion or 4.5 billion that they put aside for Ukraine. And this is not like one of those things in which it's gone forever. They did this to teach Ukraine a lesson. At that point, really didn't have much information, but still it was the fact that Ukraine, you made issues here. This is not a pro-EU thing. We need you to go back. And to make sure that you go back, we're going to hold this money. And then when you finally approve of the changes to go back, which, by the way, is not going to happen until, I believe, August 1st. I believe that's the date. That would be, what, Friday of next week? Once it finally passes, that money will probably continue. But it does show that, look, like that hurt. That really did hurt. And I know some people are making the arguments that, oh, no, this wasn't even a plan. This was just something Zelensky did and realized he messed up, and now they're backtracking. I don't think so. I truly believe that this was a 4D chess move in which Ukraine saw that there was still corruption. There was. And Zelensky wanting to get rid of it at a parliament level because we can't have elections. The only other way of doing that is a major shakeup. And that's what we saw. Zelensky, about 3 weeks ago, had mentioned that there was going to be major shakeups. I mean, we just saw the prime minister change, and now Yulia's in charge. She's only been in charge now for about a week and a half. And I'm pretty sure this was one of those things that they did in order to make it happen. And remember that as all of this was happening, Zelensky's own team was investigating the boards. That's how they found out. They raided their houses. They found connections. Some of these board members were getting money from Russia. But here's the issue we run into. As all of this was unfolding, because you and I weren't getting any information, Zelensky's team wasn't releasing anything. I mean, we were emailing his team too. What on earth is happening here? They weren't putting anything out because it was a full-blown investigation that, once again, I feel like was a 4D chess. They were trying to weed out some of these politicians. And I will say that in the coming months, that's what I'm being told, that in the coming months, we're going to see the results of this. We're going to see the reasons, the real reasons why this went down and how it will help Ukraine. But there's one thing that we haven't talked about, and that is Russia's stance in all of this. Because as this was going on, Russia took it and ran with it. First with getting rid of the anti-corruption boards, and then next, the protests. Because Russia took all the photos of the people protesting. And they said, look, Ukrainians are against Zelensky. They want Zelensky removed as their dictator. And they can't because Ukraine refuses to have elections. And it's funny because my friends who all work for different publications inside of Ukraine made sure to put multiple videos and photos up saying, we're not protesting to remove Zelensky. We're not protesting against the war. We're protesting about our future, and we want Zelensky to change his way. But Russia took those images and started sharing them worldwide with those phrases. They share that news everywhere, even in North Korea and in some countries inside of Africa, because I saw some headlines on newspaper publications in certain countries in Africa that showed, I think the title was something like Ukrainians Against Zelensky, trying to remove a dictator or something like that. And of course, you would then had U.S. politicians, such as, that's right, Senator Green, Congressman Green, Congresswoman Green. What am I saying over there? That started running through all these anti-Ukrainian messages. Marjorie Taylor Greene, honestly, is one of those we always say is a Russian asset. She put a bill on the floor not too long ago to stop aid to Ukraine. She does everything in her power to try to discredit Ukraine for some reason. She just really hates Ukraine. That being said, because Russia put out that propaganda, you had people like that. And then pro-Russia influencers in the United States share that information. And this is where the problem comes in. Because you and I are going to fact check everything. We're going to go back and, oh, wait, no, that's not right. This is what it was. This is why this happened. But there's a lot of people that just consume the information and just believe everything that comes out of their mouth as fact. And so whether it be, Pool, whether it be Marjorie Taylor Greene or other influencers spreading this stuff out, those audience members are automatically just going to believe that's fact. And those influencers aren't going to correct their stories or give the right information, which now leaves the fake propaganda news in the mindset of people in which it wasn't true. And so it hurts Ukraine. And so doing that and the way that Russia spewed it out there did a number on Ukraine. It made Americans, of all, most importantly, think things that are not necessarily true, without all the facts, without understanding how this went down, why it went down, and what's going to happen in the future, which is ultimately a Ukraine where we're going to see less corruption and more accountability for those who are trying to, whether it's steal money, whether it is trying to make deals with Russia, give intel, which is what we're finding out. They were giving intel, and then they were getting paid for that intel, and they were stopping investigations from going on. But because we didn't have this information at the beginning, it made things look bad. And so Russia taking those photos did one thing. And then the corruption thing, Russia took that and ran with it too, saying, look how corrupt Ukraine is. They have removed these boards, which means that Zelensky is now hiding X, Y, and Z, and they ran with that information. Once again, that information that went out to different publications, those Russian publications, and I don't know if it's paying certain people, they're probably once again pulling, just like Tenet Media, paying Russian influencers in America or Americans to push Russian propaganda. And then that information stuck out there. And once again, puts bad images. Now, I will say that thank goodness we didn't hear anything from Trump and Trump's administration. We once again did hear from a couple senators who were quite upset by this, but Ukraine quickly turning back and fixing things and doing what they did definitely made things a lot better. And it now leaves us in a weird moment because unfortunately that took over the news cycle for the week when it comes to Ukraine, which means like everything from Sumy to Kharkiv, those explosions and those things didn't really make the headlines. And, it took away from the important things. So back to the main question. Did Zelensky pull 4D chess? I think so. He got rid of corruption. He showed the world that Ukraine wants to continue to get rid of corruption. He showed the world that Ukrainians are allowed to protest and it's okay. We're not going to attack them. And I think in a way also showcased that the democracy works. Because if you look at it from or maybe he was backtracking, you would say to yourself, Parliament did something, Zelensky did something, the people came out, they said, we don't like it. Then Zelensky fixed it, Parliament's going to fix it, and then there you go. And it worked. Democracy in Ukraine works. And maybe that should be the takeaway in all of this. That, yes, there's corruption. We're fixing the corruption. We tried changing something. We're changing it to this way, to do this way. You can protest. We're happy to hear you. Zelensky acknowledged we heard them. And now we're moving on. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys with today. A lot did continue to go down. We didn't make a video about the peace talks this week because really they meant nothing. Russia did not come to play. They came to just kind of BS. But that's where we're at this very moment. I want to know what you guys think about all of this. I know this was a longer video, and I really do like this take. And I went through, believe you me, there's over 3,000, it was 200 and something things, but over 3,000 thumbs up. So a lot of people do tend to agree with this. And so the one thing I just want to add in here, the one thing I was so concerned about as the protests were going on, as I was telling my friends who were giving me information, sending me pictures of people's signs and all that, because we were doing videos about it. The one interesting thing is that my biggest concern is they're protesting. And this week, we didn't really see as many drones. And I was warning them, hey, please be safe, please be safe. And then one of my other friends who are journalists went to me, Russia's not going to send drones in our way while we're protesting. I was like, why? Why wouldn't they? Because they're always going after civilians. They go, because the protests help Russia. So it was almost as though because we were protesting, Russia didn't want to use drones because it would make them look really bad. Plus, they were using the images from the protest to push this Russian propaganda. And when you start thinking like that, your brain kind of goes nuts a little bit because you're like, oh my God, so if Ukraine just did a protest every week in the cities, Russia wouldn't attack them. Though it didn't help them in certain areas. I mean, they still sent drones and ballistic missiles. Heck, just last night, they used a cluster bomb in Kharkiv. And we know this because if you look at pictures and videos of the street, you can see all these tiny little holes. And there's like hundreds, if not thousands of them, because as that bomb is being released and then all the BBs and shrapnel come out, they create these little holes in the ground. Anyway, that being said, I really want to know your comments about this in the comment section below. Where do you stand on this? Do you think he played 4D chess? Do you think he just backtracked? I do find this very interesting. This is what makes geopolitics very interesting. And Zelensky's been pulling a lot of cards out that we've never seen before. Yeah. Spider web. That's so cool. Anyway, I want to thank you for joining me. If you haven't done so yet, we have a free newsletter where we break down all the news in Ukraine. You could sign up for that. Link in the description of this video. I want to thank you for joining me. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. And a special thank you out to those who signed up for the paid version of my newsletter. One of the perks is to get your name at the end of my video, and I appreciate you all doing that because ultimately, I'm an independent journalist who spends only 4 hours sleeping, the rest just kind of working. So anytime that you can financially help, I greatly appreciate it. Anyway, you guys stay safe and sound. I'll see you later.